I have to use my intuition to understand whether or not something is going to make you cry immediately. Is it going to make you laugh immediately? Is it going to scare you? Is it going to inspire you? And I feel like if I feel that, then perhaps you do too. So many of us go through traumas and loss of all kinds.
Right.
We just don't talk about it publicly. You know, we don't acknowledge it. Maybe it makes us feel weak. Maybe it makes us think that other people will judge us for it. You know, that we can't get over it or whatever that, you know, phrase is.
Right.
But for me, it's about time, you know, for us to be more open about the things that we're going through, because the truth of the matter is that life is going to keep coming,
Yeah.
you know, and we can't be fearful of it.
Hello, and welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm Helena Andrews Dyer, a pop culture reporter here at the Post, and today I'm joined by Bozoma Saint John, who many of you might know from her social media handle, Badass Boz, which I'm very excited to say. She's here to join us and talk about her incredible new memoir, The Urgent Life. Bozoma, welcome to Washington Post Live.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
So let's dive right in, because I know you have so much to say and I wanted to get to everything. Let's start with the title of the book, The Urgent Life. And that word urgent, it has so many different connotations, right? It can mean serious, vital, lightning speed when we consider your incredible meteoric career as a top marketing executive. But tell us what you mean by urgent and how it was redefined in your life.
Well, all those definitions are right also. all those ways in which we express urgency are right. For me, I felt urgent early on in my career, and perhaps I was a little reckless, you know, sometimes spontaneous, sometimes feeling like, oh, well, I've got to get to the thing right now because I've got to beat everyone else. You know, that was urgency to me. But when I was faced with loss, especially the loss of my husband to cancer, he was diagnosed and dead in 6 months. You know, it felt so quick. It felt like we didn't have time. It felt like there wasn't an opportunity to really reconcile everything. And in that moment, I understood that urgency needed to be not just about time, but about intention. You know, it's like, what am I spending my time doing? Do I care about it? Is it going to grow me? Is it going to help me feel like I'm living the fullest life that I can? And if it didn't feel like that, then I didn't need to participate. I didn't need to be part of that. And that has been true for my career. It has been true in my personal life. It's been really true about everything, the way that I approach just life in general now. And that's the urgency I feel.
Yeah, so it doesn't take on, I think sometimes when people hear the word urgency, it's like almost like an anxiety is building up. But for you, it's something, it has like a positive, or it has turned into something that's
Yes,
positive.
yes. I feel inspired by it. You know,
Mm.
sometimes we talk about death and it feels so morbid, you know, as if we should just be fearful and hide in our homes or under a rock somewhere. You know, and I'm not saying that I live my life without fear. I don't think that that's possible as a human being, you know, especially given what I've been through. I do have fear, but I do see the end of life as an inspiration to live my life more fully. And that's why when I think about urgency, I am not intimidated by it, or feel like it is an impossibility, or feel like it is too overwhelming. To me, I wanna feel inspired by life, to be excited about it. That I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to waste time. And so if there is something I'm doing which doesn't make me feel joyful, and I use the word joyful specifically because it's not like everything in your life you like. You know what I mean? There's some days when you don't like anything, and then some days you just gotta chalk that up to a bad day. But in the totality of my experience in this life, I want to feel
Mm.
joyful. I want to feel satisfied. I want to feel fulfilled. And so the urgency to me is the inspired way that I live, knowing that life is short.
And it's interesting that you say that you talk about fear and life being short. In the book, you describe this major health scare that you had at in your teens, 17 to be exact, right? It's at that point where so many of us, remembering that time in my life where you feel immortal. You feel like nothing can touch you. How did that moment, describe that moment and what happened and how it shifted how you felt about death and finality and mortality at that time?
Well, you're a pop culture expert, so I'm sure you'll appreciate this reference. But I was watching Beverly Hills 90210, and
Love it.
the one of the main characters, Brenda, was doing a
Mhm.
self-breast exam on the show. And I think that is such a powerful tool, storytelling and narratives. I mean, now, of course, I do it for a living. But at the time, yeah, being 17 and watching that show and knowing that, like, oh, this character I so loved was concerned about her health in a way that made her check her breasts and see if there was anything up in there. I was like, oh yeah, let me do that too. And quite shockingly, I did feel something, and it scared the hell out of me. So when I talked to my mom about it, and we went to the doctor and found that they had to do some more tests to rule out cancer or anything else, all of a sudden my carefree, immortal life took on a very real, practical end. I could
Mm.
see where the doctor could come back and say, "Oh, this is a terrible thing. Like something bad is happening in your body." And so I obsessed about that, thought about that a lot. And it changed my perspective on how I generally live, even at that age, because you're right. I think then you think you have your whole life ahead of you. Like nothing could stop you, right? You're
Yeah.
17 and invincible. And
Mhm.
it became a very real life-changing moment.
And taking that moment, leading us through your story when you get to college and you meet your first big love, Ben, and then you lose him when he dies by suicide just a few years later. Again, at a really young age, right? These are really deep losses or deep moments in your life, right? At so young, how did that loss again inform how you processed death
Yeah,
and dying into your
yeah,
adulthood?
yeah. Well, I mean, this was probably that was my first experience with mental health issues or mental illness. I myself had been diagnosed with depression shortly before that, about a year before that, and I was taking medication. As you mentioned, I had fallen in love with Ben on the campus of Wesleyan University in Middletown, Connecticut, and thought that there was, it's young love, right? Everything is roses, everything is wonderful. It's like the birds are chirping constantly. And he, was also battling depression, but wasn't on medication and didn't feel the need to be. And in my book, I talk about that, how that was a challenge for us. Him feeling like I didn't need to be on it, and he feeling like, well, we're both invincible. It's fine. Of course, now today we are so much more conscious about mental health and making sure that we are talking about challenges, issues that all of us are having, right? Not just adults, but young people, who are facing their own issues. And when Ben took his life, I was devastated by it because it didn't make any sense to me. I didn't understand how someone so young could want to end life that seemed like, there was something bright just coming around the corner. So why not just wait until then? And that has also impacted me, even as I sit here now, because I want to be active in life. That thought that, well, something better is coming along around the corner. So why not just wait for it to come? It's like, no, no, no. Sometimes we have to go and get it. And additionally, the importance of understanding what happens to those who are quote unquote left behind, when something that devastating happens. We talk so much about, the victims of mental health, but rarely do we talk about the people who are left to manage their emotions or the feelings they have of guilt and all kinds of other complicated emotions afterwards. I battled a lot with that afterwards, feeling that I could have done something to save him, loved him better, said the
Mm,
right thing, not missed the phone call, and I battled
mm.
with that for a very long time. And so it's also an opening, I think, for us to talk about um, those who are left with their guilt after someone they know dies that way.
And that's so interesting you say about, the folks who are left, right? The other people. And the book, The Urgent Life, centers around your love story with your husband, Peter, and also the story of losing Peter to a rare form of cancer. And you two were separated at the time of his diagnosis. And there's just this deeply personal part of the book as you talk about guilt, right? Where you let the reader in, you let us in on your inner thoughts as you sort of weigh the options when Peter requests that you cancel the divorce and that you two stay married in the wake of his terminal diagnosis. Take us back to that moment in your life. What did you learn by saying yes to Peter's request?
Well, I'll tell you, the biggest thing I learned is that love is complicated. Love is, and marriage is even more complicated. You know, we think that love solves all issues, right? All
Mm,
problems, and it does not. Sometimes you're making decisions on a number of different verticals. Love is one, loyalty is another, care and concern for yourself is yet another. And that's complicated. I don't even think we have time to talk about that. But I'm very, very grateful, even even in the light of the loss of Peter, that I am grateful for the time that we had time to reconcile, that we had time to forgive each other for the things and the ways that we hurt each other. I'm grateful that we were able to spend those last few weeks marking things off on our list that we always wanted to say or always wanted to do. They weren't the really big things, right? We didn't fly to Thailand and have a vacation. For sure we didn't. But appreciating gelato one last time, yep, we did that.
mm,
Things that sometimes we take for granted so much in our daily life, the hustle and bustle of it. It's one thing that I hope, again, that people will take from the book, which is that, sometimes it's not about climbing Everest. That's not actually the goal. It's
mm.
it's the moments that you have where you're just appreciating that you're there, that you have this person or that you are enjoying this moment, and how can we do that more? So that is what, the reconciliation with Peter taught me, that love isn't straightforward, and by the way, there's no shame in having gone through the ups and downs. And this life is our own to make. I don't owe anybody any explanation. In fact, that picture you showed, the day that I posted it on Facebook in October of 2013, that was the caption. I just said, "This is us. There's no, we don't need to explain ourselves." And that our love didn't need more explanation.
Mm. I love that. And you talked about sort of the smaller moments, right? So it's not always the big, like you say, climbing Mount Everest or the trip to Thailand. It's just those little moments that can be just as urgent, right? Even though they don't feel so big, but just as big. Has your has the way you experience joy shifted since then? And if so, how?
Oh my goodness. Yes, it has. In so many ways. Um, because I think before this, I thought that joy had to come and find you. And like we've been
Mm,
talking about, even love, peace, name any of the, you know, goals that we have in emotional states. I thought that it would find you. And when I was in my deep grief, in that darkness, I also realized that happiness and love and joy, they don't come into the darkness. They won't find you there. You have to be active and go get it. You have to leave the darkness and go to it. So my relationship with joy changed. It was like every day that I woke up, I had to make a decision, the choice to find joy, the choice to be open to an experience. Because it's very easy to choose to sit down and not do it. Very, very easy. There were many days when I was just like, you know what? Actually, I don't even want the sun to shine. And guess what? The sun was so disrespectful. It would come out anyway. But the choice to find joy now, we can choose not to be joyful because
Mm.
that's also a choice. Sometimes I think in grief it feels like, oh well, I'm helpless. There's nothing I can do. I'm just here in my darkness. But that is a choice also. It's a choice. And so I'm not saying that grief doesn't exist. I still have my grief. It's not as if I got over it. And by the way, that was one of the things I found so interesting when people tell me, oh, time heals all wounds. And I was like, no, it
Mm.
doesn't. Really not. I still have scars. I can still look at it and say, ouch, that hurt. And so for all of us, as we think about the ways in which you live and how losses or trauma have scarred us, the choice to keep moving, the choice to find joy, the choice to find love again is truly in our own power. And that is how I'm able to still move through life with all of my pains and traumas and scars.
Absolutely. It's like the saying, I don't look like what I've been through, right?
Yes, 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 yes.
Absolutely.
Because you know what? I'm real cute too. So
I love that. Um, and so we're talking, I mean, deep, deep stuff in this book, right? It's reading it, the phrase emotional roller coaster gets used a lot, but this was an emotional roller coaster, right? So many highs, so many deep lows. What was it like going there, right? Telling us your story, revisiting it for yourself. Was it therapeutic? Was it cathartic? Was it just painful? All three? What was revisiting these moments in your life like for you?
yeah, well, that might have been one of the biggest surprises in writing the book. I actually didn't write the book that I pitched. The pitch I wrote was to document essentially the last 3 months of my husband's life. I had created an album in my phone off of a saying that people kept, giving me. They kept saying, "Take it one day at a time," and it was so annoying to me, that thought, because I was like, "You don't even know what my days are like. We're counting down to the end, and you're telling me to take one day at a time." So I would take actually a picture a day, something that was inspiring or something that was sad or something I just wanted to remember. And so the original book I was going to write was a story of those photos. And what ended up happening is, as I was telling those stories, other memories started to come, that felt connected. So when I talked about the moment or the day when Peter found out that his cancer was going to be terminal, and he asked me to call my dad to come to the hospital, I needed to explain why that moment was so significant. So it meant I had to go back into the past and pull the memories of the experiences that they'd had, the relationship that they had, and my own relationship with my dad, so that you could understand the fullness of that moment. And so what ended up happening is that I kept telling more and more and more about my experiences. And the other magic of it is that there were some memories, of course, I'm sure as you can imagine, that I did not want to revisit. I didn't want to go back to that day, you know? But the miracle about memories is that when we lock all that away, we also lock away the joy, the good stuff, the love in the memories. And that's what I found I had done. And so when I pulled it forward, I was also able to relive the beautiful moments of those memories that I had totally put away. And so now I have, even now, like I have a different perspective on painful memories. That when you lock them away, you lock away everything. And what
Mm.
a joy it's been to relive some of the good stuff, even in the midst of the pain.
Yes. No, and also telling folks that story, telling them your story, knowing that there's someone that can find something in every single part of this book, right? And anyone who's going through loss, whether it's the loss of a loved one, of a husband, of a child, of a parent, and your story, even though I'm sure it was absolutely painful at so many moments to tell it, it is so worthy, right? All of our stories are so worthy to be told because someone
Mm,
can learn something from it, right?
yeah.
We have an audience question
Oh.
from Mary Lang in Wisconsin, who asks, what was it that fed your energy and kept your sustainability and your heart going during those turning points in your life?
Mm, gosh, that is such a great question. Um, well, I think inspiration comes from many different places. For me, one that I recall very much was in the difficult decision of separating from my husband in the first place. The inspiration for that was actually my daughter. I think many times if you're married and you're going through some tough times, we always say like, well, we stay for the children, right? Well, I decided to go for mine because I knew that the person I was in my marriage, at the end of my marriage, was not a happy person, not a joyful person, not a loving person, not the person that her dad fell in love with. And I wanted my daughter to know that person, and I knew I had to leave in order to do that. And so in that moment, that was what drove me, inspired to be a better person for my daughter to experience as a mom. But there have been many other situations that have inspired me in that darkness. I talk in my book a little bit about even dawn. It's a time in the day, but it might sound corny, but just seeing that sun come back up, after the darkness, it feels poetic to me. And so, even though I'm not a morning person by any stretch, I now, when I'm going through a tough time, I always wake up at the dawn,
Mm.
just as a reminder, that the sun eventually comes up again, regardless of the situation. It always comes up.
And speaking of your daughter, Lael, did I pronounce that correctly? Lael.
Yes, lay out.
Um, Lael, you have a revelation in the book. You have like this aha moment while you're explaining to her that her father was dying. And you write in the book, when I'm in the midst of my hardest conversations, I speak as if I'm talking to a 4-year-old. We spend so much time burying the truth in a bunch of excuses and rationales, trying to make ourselves feel better or to skirt the uncomfortable. But why add all that extra fluff when the truth is simply what it is?
Mm.
How did that moment, this aha moment, like about truth and transparency, impact your professional life? How have you
Mm.
applied it to who you are in the boardroom and in your career?
Yes, well, actually, the advice for that moment with my daughter came from a very good friend, Melissa Robinson Brown, who's a psychologist, and told me to use the real words when I was talking to my 4-year-old. As a parent, you want to protect your kids from everything, the bad stuff. You don't want them to feel any pain at all. But the truth of the matter was that her dad was dying and that he was going to be gone at some point. And so we needed to tell her that, and I needed to explain to her when he died that he was not coming back. And I said it as simply as that, as clearly as that. And the unveil for me in that moment, the aha in it was that as adults, we actually need that too. In our adult conversations, we need to be clear, simple, to the point. And so in my professional career, it has affected all my relationships that way. That I am clear about what it is I need, or when I am moving on, to say it just like that. There's no need to add fluff or some extra excuses on top of things. First of all, people can usually see through it anyway. And so why not just be honest about it? So yes, I consider looking at the conversation like I would be talking to a 4-year-old and say, okay, this is the situation. I need to move on, or I have found another job and I'm going to go and do that. Instead of trying to cover it up with some excuses about, what was happening or how I feel or any of that stuff. No, it's just time to go and just keep it simple.
Mm. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. That needs to be on a t-shirt. Um, Speaking of your career, from Spike Lee to Pepsi to Uber, Endeavor, Netflix, your career is an example of not only taking risks and big leaps, but trusting your gut. Um, what is your advice to others about listening to what you call your inner voice?
Oh, yes, that wonderful intuition that we don't give ourselves credit enough for. You know, it's like, how many times have you asked somebody for some advice knowing the answer yourself? You know, we're creating pro and con lists where it's like you're really either talking yourself into a really bad idea or talking yourself out of a good one. You know, we do that all the time. Instead of just listening to what is going on in our spirit or in your gut, which is telling you what to do, you just don't want to listen to it. But I have found that my intuition has never steered me wrong. It really hasn't. It's like, people call it vibes or energy. It's like, have you ever met somebody that you knew had some bad vibes, but you talked to them anyway? You had lunch with them anyway, even though your spirit told you not to do it?
Mm,
It's like that. It's like that in my career. And so I have trusted it. When I'm in a situation and I'm like, ooh, something doesn't feel good here anymore. I don't beat myself up over the decision to have gone to a place. I don't think I wasted my time while being there, but situations change and people change and nobody's at fault. It's just that it's time to go. And so I really don't waste the time in trying to figure out whether or not I should stay or should I change a little bit about the situation. Sometimes things just they can't change and they are what they are. And so you have to accept it. And so instead of battling against something that really can't change, and using all your energy towards that thing, ooh, I'd rather use my energy towards building the next thing. And that's
mhm,
why in my career, I have decided on my own when it's time to go or if I should give it another shot.
mm. Dropping gems, I could do all of the snapping, right? You talk about the gems that you drop on social media. One of them is that tomorrow is a fictional place.
Mhm.
And that's part of the tagline of the Badass Workshop. I'm just very excited to be able to say badass. Talk to us about the Badass Workshop and your mission there. What are you trying to teach us?
Oh, well, I have been so overwhelmed by the number of people who have asked me, well, how do you do it? How do you get to the top? How do you live so unapologetically? Even like how to negotiate a raise. I've been so overwhelmed by these questions for a long time. And so at the start of the pandemic, while we were all locked away at home, I was like, you know what? I think I'm just going to create a class where I'm just going to talk about my experiences, teach people how to do what I've done. And it was such a surprise to me by the overwhelming attention, engagement, just folks who created a whole community unto themselves in the badasses. And so the class has grown now. I've done 10 sessions ranging from the mind, spirit, and body to, yes, how to negotiate, how to make that money, even to the lessons about, how to give feedback. There's all kind of stuff. And so now I am doing a super session based on this book, The Urgent Life, where I give 7 lessons from my book on how to create the life that you really want. And so I'm really excited about it. It'll be on Saturday. And it's a good community and we have a good time while I drop more gems.
Yes, all of the gems. Um, and you talk about, you mentioned just now living unapologetically, and you are a shining example of living unapologetically as a woman, as a Black woman. And you talk in the book, you write in the book about sometimes not feeling seen, right? Or
Mhm.
sometimes folks not getting who you are in all of your badass right?
Yeah.
um, what advice do you have for women, Black women in the workplace, to
Mhm.
come as their full selves and to be seen fully and to really live and work unapologetically?
Well, I'm so glad you point out Black women because I feel like this should be the Black women's holiday. It's like the cross between Black History Month and Women's History Month.
Mhm.
I mean, shouldn't this be
March
like the
1st.
day?
Yep.
I mean, I kind of feel like we should just do that.
We kn it That's it. March 1st, the day of the Black women.
March 1st is our day. Um, But I love Black women. I just love us. And I wish for us a more successful future. A future where we have the ability to show up exactly as ourselves. I have been in so many rooms which have tried to make me feel small, which have tried to make me feel insignificant, as if my culture or my experiences don't matter because they're not the quote unquote majority. But the beauty of the idea of our contribution to not just society, but to the world is that it is a fact. This is not even me just like saying, oh, well, pointing out folks from history and saying this person or that person or that person. But the fact that, like in science, for instance, okay, you take matter, and we know that when matter exists, it is made up of molecules. And when you change one molecule, the whole matter changes. If you put in that molecule again, it changes again. And so my contribution as a Black woman, with my culture, with my experiences, with my knowledge, all unique unto me, when it enters a matter, it changes. And so therefore, I am significant in the space. So I want for our culture, for our society, for our corporations to understand that the contribution we have is actually significant and that we need to walk that way. And so I don't shrink when I go into rooms. I know that my contribution really matters. And it is even as important as showing up as my full self, as you just said, not just theoretically and not just psychologically, but physically. That when I decided to show up on the Apple keynote stage, the stage that Steve Jobs built, that is known for the Black turtleneck and jeans, that instead of showing up like that, I showed up with my full curly afro, with a tight pink dress on, show off my curves, playing, Rapper's Delight and Afro beats and a song by my niece Leaf, who, of course, because I'm that kind of auntie. I wanted to show up as a Black woman and not pretend to be something else. Because look, we're not going to be appreciated for being anything else anyway. So you might as well show up as yourself.
Yes. Show up as yourself, no playing small, no shrinking, and we matter.
We matter.
Bozoma Saint John, we're out of time. We'll have to end it there, but that is a great place to end it. Thank you so much for joining us. The book is The Urgent Life. Thank you, Bozoma.
Thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate it.
And thank you to all of you for joining us and for watching. To learn more about our upcoming programs and to register for upcoming events, go to WashingtonPostLive.com. I'm Helena Andrews Dyer. Thanks for watching.